when 19-year-old Céline Figard disappeared on the 19th of December whilst making her way from France to the UK to visit her cousin for the Christmas season. Everyone started to panic, and the authorities immediately stepped into action in order to find her. Had Céline run away, or had she been abducted? Or even worse, had a serial killer taken her as one of their victims? As the Christmas festivities would come and go, and the hunt for Céline was well underway, devastatingly, her naked body would be found 10 days later on the 29th of December. With the missing persons case now turning into a murder investigation, the police were on the hunt for Céline's killer.
Police hunting the killer of the French student Céline Figard are investigating possible links with a number of other murders. They're particularly interested in the case of Tracy Turner, who disappeared from a service station on the M6 in Staffordshire in March last year.
There are several cases around the country which are well known and have been previously reported, where naked women have been found adjacent to major roads or in country roads with similar injuries. Those are things that we will be looking at.
With eyewitnesses catching a glimpse of her killer as she got into his vehicle that fateful 19th of December, never to be seen alive again, the hunt was well and truly on.
Officers are still looking for the driver of the white Mercedes lorry which Céline was seen getting into at Chieveley service station.
Would they find her murderer before he did this again to another helpless woman? This is the devastating case of Céline Figard. Céline Figard was born on the 23rd of May 1976 in Besançon in France to her parents Martine and Bernard Figard. Céline had two brothers, Stéphane and Nicolas, and a sister, Karine. Céline was an accountancy student studying at the Lycée Le Grand Chinois, but she also had a love for the UK and she travelled there often in the hopes to improve her English. In the summer of 1995, she went to the UK and worked at the Ashbourne Hotel in Fordingbridge in Hampshire for 2 months over the summer, alongside her cousin Jean-Marc, who was the head waiter there. Céline had enjoyed her time so much that summer that she wanted to return for the Christmas period, to once again visit her cousin and to work some more. So, on the 18th of December 1995, Céline's parents arranged for a family friend employed by a local firm to take her to the French coast, where she crossed the English Channel the following day, arriving in Ashford, Kent. Céline had been unable to travel by coach because of the public sector strikes in France, so therefore had to find alternative travel arrangements. Arriving in Kent on the 19th of December, the family friend left her with another French lorry driver, as he had to travel elsewhere. Armed with 2 bottles of rare champagne ready for the Christmas celebration, Céline got in the lorry with the new driver, Roger Bouvier, and they headed to Chieveley services near Newbury in Berkshire. When they arrived to the service station, Roger once again said he had to part ways with her as he was not going in her direction, so Céline tried to call her cousin Jean-Marc to see if he could pick her up from the service station, but Céline misdialed his number and she never got through to him. Céline was then approached by another lorry driver who offered her a lift to Salisbury, where she could then get a bus to her final destination, Fordingbridge. This new lorry driver also said that Céline could use his mobile phone in the cab of his lorry, so she left with that driver around 4:30 p.m, but Céline never arrived at her destination. Céline's disappearance received extensive news coverage in the UK around the Christmas and New Year period, amid fears that it could be linked to a series of killings around the English Midlands, which police called the work of a Midlands Ripper, so police jumped straight into action. Immediately, detectives launched a full-scale hunt for Céline, and the investigation was led by DCS John McCarmont of West Mercia Police. 100 officers from 3 forces, a helicopter and a plane, concentrated on roads leading from Newbury to Salisbury in Wiltshire. More information regarding the lorry driver, with whom Céline was last seen with, was also revealed. The second French lorry driver, Roger Bouvier, who had dropped Céline off at Chieveley services, had told police that he had seen the driver and that he had reservations about him, and that the driver appeared very sinister. He said he had been so concerned for Céline's welfare that once she went off with him, Roger went back to his lorry and he prayed she would be okay. This new driver was described as driving a white Mercedes cab which was pulling a grey trailer with a refrigeration unit. The driver was described as white and aged between 30 to 35 years old. He had short fair hair and a short-cropped chin-strap beard, but no moustache, and so with this information, a photo fit was issued. By Christmas Day, investigators were working on the theory that the man had abducted Céline Figard, but despite extensive publicity and appeals, there had been no trace of the lorry driver. As detectives followed up numerous calls from the public, Inspector Mr. Thomas said, "I have no doubt at all we will find this lorry driver. My great concern is we will not find him in time to recover Céline."
We're obviously getting more pessimistic as each day passes. I mean, experience has taught us the longer it goes, the more bad the prognosis.
Céline's father, Bernard, arrived in the UK on Boxing Day on the 26th of December, but Céline's mother did not join as she was too ill to travel. Bernard Figard attended news conferences with police and appealed for information to find his daughter. In French he said, "Céline, if you can hear us, if you can see us, please show yourself. Your family and friends are waiting. Please keep helping us. We need to find Céline." Bernard described his daughter as timid but a happy person and said that his daughter had no reason to run away and that she was incredibly reliable and usually somebody who stayed in contact with her friends and family. As the days continued to pass, detectives now started to say that they were working on the worst-case scenario that she had been murdered. Officers examined similar unsolved murders amid concerns that this could be the work of the same individual.
French teenager Céline Figard may have been the victim of a serial killer. Police revealed they were looking at similarities with the murders of 8 other women.
At one point, they believed that Céline's disappearance could possibly be linked to the disappearance of 23-year-old hitchhiker Ila Karjalainen, who was last seen 30 miles away from the service area where Céline Figard was last seen. Ila had been on the final stage of a touring holiday across Europe when she disappeared, but sadly, she was found strangled 4 months later on the Blenheim estate. This link to Ila, however, was later ruled out, with lead detective Mr. McCarmont saying that there was no firm evidence whatsoever to link Céline's case with any other investigation. But finally, on the 29th of December, Céline Figard was found, but sadly not alive. On the morning of the 29th of December 1995, the naked body of a young woman was found, dumped at a lay-by on the A449 near the Worcester village of Hawford by a motorist who had stopped to change a windscreen wiper. Devastatingly, the body was positively identified as that of Céline Figard the next day, and a post-mortem examination determined she had been strangled and bludgeoned to death with a heavy implement. Following the post-mortem examination, it was determined that sexual intercourse had taken place shortly before her death, and detectives believed it had occurred against her will. Police said that her body had been lying where it was found for about 24 hours, and they were working on the theory that she had been held captive before being killed. They also concluded that she had been dead for at least 4 to 5 days.
Céline's father, Bernard Figard, laid flowers today at the spot where her body was found. As he stood quietly, an interpreter spoke for him.
Monsieur Figard said that Céline came to this country because she likes England and she likes the people here, and he appealed to everyone to come forward and to help to find the person responsible. Anybody who has any information to come forward and to help find the person responsible.
As Céline had been found completely naked and with nothing on her, their minds went to the rare champagne that she had been carrying with her. As the champagne was not one you would often see, they hoped that if they could find the champagne, they might be able to find more information regarding her murderer, so they appealed for more information concerning the bottles of champagne, saying, "This particular type of champagne is not exported to anywhere in the world outside France and is not sold in this country. It is a 1993 vintage and only 60,000 bottles have been produced." On the 12th of January 1996, investigators announced that they would perform DNA testing on the drivers of all vehicles similar to the white Mercedes. This was the first time the method of using the UK's first national DNA screening programme was used to identify a murder suspect. And so, detectives traced more than 1,000 vehicles and tested more than 5,000 drivers, but sadly, none of them produced any connections with Celine. Towards the end of January 1996, a Crime Watch appeal was made, and finally a breakthrough in the case was made. Around 5 people contacted the police following the Crime Watch appeal, saying that there were possible links with someone they knew, and they even recognized his image from the photo fit that had been created. And so, finally, on the 19th of February, West Mercia police confirmed that a man had been arrested, and he was subsequently identified as Stuart Morgan, a 36-year-old self-employed lorry driver from Poole in Dorset. Stuart William Morgan was an English lorry driver and a former heating engineer for Poole. His parents, John and Juliana Morgan, raised him and his 4 siblings in Tunbridge Wells in Kent. Stuart's father, John, was employed as a council foreman, and his mother, a refugee from the former East Germany, worked as a school cleaner. In 1974, Stuart got into trouble with the law and was convicted for burglary. Following this, Stuart later trained as a plumber and heating engineer at Croydon Polytechnic, and then went on to open a plumbing business in the Tunbridge Wells area. This new business venture, however, did not go too well, and once it had failed, he moved to Dorset in 1983 to work as a heating engineer for Bournemouth Borough Council. Once again deciding to do something new, Stuart became a lorry driver in 1991, 4 years before abducting Celine. Not only did Stuart have difficulties in his professional life, but he wasn't the most successful in his love life either, no thanks to himself. As Stuart Morgan seemed to be an extremely ordinary man, women believed him to be plausible and honest, but this was far from the truth, as his lifestyle as a lorry driver gave him the perfect cover for being away from home, travelling the country. Stuart was constantly unfaithful. Stuart Morgan met his first wife, Catherine Ann Smith, in 1979, and they got married 3 years later. 1 year after that, the couple had twin sons, Jamie and Martin. Stuart and Catherine divorced in March of 1986, as Stuart had begun a relationship with another woman called Glinda Parker 4 years previously, in 1982, and so Stuart Morgan left and played no further part in his twin sons' lives. In 1985, 1 year before his divorce with Catherine, Glinda and Stuart had a son, and they called him Stuart Jr., and the couple then married themselves in April of 1994. During this second relationship, however, Stuart had earlier started another relationship with a third woman named Alison Norris. Whilst Glinda Parker stayed at home with their son, Stuart Jr., she believed her husband was working away and sleeping in his lorry, but this was far from the truth. Stuart Morgan was actually at his second home in Wigan with Alison Norris. In 1994, however, Stuart and Alison parted ways in February, and 2 months later, he married Glinda in April of 1994. And just 1 year later, Stuart Morgan abducted and murdered Celine Figard. On the 19th of December 1995, Stuart Morgan was driving from Leeds to the Southampton docks when he picked up Celine Figard, and within hours of her climbing into his cab, she was dead. Detectives concluded that after raping and killing her, Stuart Morgan left her body in the bottom bunk of his cab for up to 10 days whilst he continued to drive the lorry, driving and sleeping in it for at least some of that time. Heartbreakingly, Celine Figard had been left dead in the cab of his lorry on Christmas Day. He had parked the cab opposite his house, leaving her inside whilst he celebrated Christmas at home inside. 4 days later, on the 29th of December, Stuart Morgan made a secret journey to a desolate wooded lay-by on the A449 near Worcester, and there he dumped her naked body and returned to the warehouse to fulfill other deliveries. The not-so-bright Stuart Morgan then proceeded to completely implicate himself and made his arrest inevitable. It turned out that Stuart had given one of the bottles of champagne that Celine had been travelling with to a woman who worked at a petrol station where Stuart regularly filled his lorry. This woman then proceeded to call the police and let them know once the information regarding the missing champagne bottles came out. Following the Crime Watch appeal and the PhotoFit release, Stewart knew people were looking for him, and he became very nervous, and so he tried to change his appearance by shaving his beard off. Naturally, his colleagues became very suspicious of this, and they also started giving the police tip-offs. Once police knew that Stewart was their murderer, they searched his property, and here they found items belonging to Céline, including photographs and a toiletry bag, as well as a blood-soaked mattress in his garage. At first, Stewart denied even meeting Céline, but once they brought up all the evidence against him, including DNA, he claimed that he and Céline had met and engaged in consensual sex. Detective Chief Superintendent John McCarmont, who led the investigation, said, "I am absolutely sure that we have looked very carefully into the background of Miss Figard, and I am absolutely positive that she in no way encouraged this man at all. I am convinced that the reason she is dead is because she resisted his attempt at seduction, however that took place." Despite all of Stuart Morgan's lies, he was subsequently arrested on the 19th of February, 1996. The trial began at Worcester Crown Court on the 2nd of October 1996 before Mr. Justice Latham and a jury, and Stuart Morgan denied the charges. Céline's parents travelled from France for the trial. Stuart Morgan admitted giving Céline Figard a lift on the afternoon of the 19th of December 1995, and that she was happy and smiling, but they had had consensual sex, and that he had then dropped her off in Southampton. He said that he did not come forward after police appealed for details of the driver who had given her a lift because he did not want his wife to learn of his infidelity. Stuart claimed her photographs and other belongings were in his possession because she had left them in his lorry, and he justified the blood-stained mattress by saying it had become stained with blood because a man had lain on it after gashing his leg while the vehicle was on loan to another driver. The prosecution, on the other hand, brought up evidence that suggested that Stuart continued to use the vehicle while Céline's body lay in the cab, and that the lorry was parked outside the house over the Christmas period. They said that Stuart Morgan had bought a spade, axe and hacksaw with the intention of dismembering the body, but changed his mind, instead making an overnight delivery run to dispose of her. The prosecution decided to then do something quite shocking, and to physically bring in the blood-stained mattress into the courtroom, rather than just show a picture of it, in the hopes that it would sway the jury, and thankfully it did just that. On the 16th of October, a jury at Worcester Crown Court took 3.5 hours to unanimously convict Stuart Morgan of Céline Figard's murder, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 20 years. Mr. Justice Latham told Stuart, "What you did to Céline has caused revulsion in the minds of all right-thinking people. There is only one sentence that I can impose for this crime, that is, one of life imprisonment." The judge then ordered the mattress to be destroyed and said that Céline's personal belongings, which Stuart Morgan had hidden in his garage, should be returned to her parents. Céline's father, Bernard, said that he was opposed to the death penalty, but thought a life sentence was appropriate and should not be shortened, saying, "This type of monster is not capable of being cured." Stuart Morgan then appealed his conviction on the grounds that it was unfair due to the level of publicity the case had received, but his application was rejected after 3 judges ruled there were insufficient grounds to justify an appeal. Years later, in January 2009, Stuart Morgan appealed again, requesting a review of the minimum term recommendation. This too was thankfully rejected, with the presiding judge saying, "The sentence is and remains a sentence of imprisonment for life. The defendant may not be considered for release until he has served at least 20 years. That is not to say that he will be released. Indeed, he will be detained unless and until the parole board is satisfied that he no longer presents a risk to the public. Even if the parole board decides then or at some time in the future to authorize his release, he will be upon license, which will extend for the rest of his life." Following the trial, Detective Chief Superintendent John McCarmont, who led the investigation, apologized to Céline's family for what Céline had gone through in the UK, saying, "I think the people of our country would simply wish to say that we are very sorry that such a dreadful crime should happen to Miss Figard while she was visiting us. Céline's father, Bernard Figard, speaking in French, said it was hard for him to explain how he and his family were feeling, saying, "How is a man capable of such cruelty and such atrocity? Where does he get his inspiration? It is true that we are all on the verge of tears today. That is probably normal. When you saw the pictures showing how he killed her, that gives you tremendous motivation to see the whole thing through."
Let us forget Morgan, but remember Céline.
Céline's body was flown home to France on the 17th of January 1996, and her funeral was held on the 20th of January, and her service was attended by her family, friends and politicians. A memorial garden dedicated to Céline was planted at St. Andrew's Church in Worcester in the United Kingdom, close to where her body was found. To this day, flowers are still regularly placed at the lay-by at Hawford, where she was found, and the location is nicknamed Le Jardin de Céline, which means Céline's garden in her memory. In prison, Stuart was reported as being well behaved, but it was said he refused to engage in any sex offender treatment programs. His response was that he was innocent of the offence for which he was serving his sentence. Stuart Morgan became eligible for parole in February of 2016, but as he had continued to maintain his innocence throughout his time in prison, he could not qualify for release without admitting his guilt. Justice William Davis suggested that by Stuart Morgan not addressing his offending behaviour, he was in effect in the same position as in December of 1995 when he murdered his victim. As of June 2022, Stuart Morgan remained imprisoned at HM Prison, Frankland, having had his most recent application for parole rejected earlier that year, but I cannot find any more recent information for where he is today, and I sure hope he is still imprisoned. Stuart Morgan is a dangerous man, and I really hope that he is never released. This case really hits home to me, and when I heard Céline's story, I really wanted to share it with the world, as I never want her to be forgotten. Women should be able to travel freely between countries alone, but monsters like this man take this freedom away. Céline was so young and had her whole life ahead of her, and Stuart Morgan selfishly stole everything from her. She just wanted to come over to a country she loved being in and to celebrate Christmas with her cousin. My heart goes out to Céline's whole family, and as always, rest in peace, Céline Figard.